Hello everyone and welcome to my very first look at the I-16 that has just been released for DCS. In fact, this was released about 5 hours ago today. So we're going to jump in and have a very first initial look at this module. Before we do, I'm going to give you a quick screenshot here of my graphics settings so that you know the conditions under which I'm looking at this aircraft. So there's my graphics settings. I'll leave that up just for a second or two and then we'll get on with looking at the module. So here I am in the cockpit for the first time and we'll just have a little scan around. You can see I've got the sun just above the horizon, so we've got some quite nice lighting coming in from outside, and the instruments have their own luminescence which actually looks bloody amazing. Now there's no trim on this aeroplane, so I can't very easily go to the external views, but what we will do is we'll pause the sim here and take a little look around the cockpit from the inside. At first glance, just with this normal field of view set, the default view, the cockpit is of a very high standard. It looks to be up with the existing DCS aircraft set in terms of the basic texture quality and the amount of 3D parts that are provided here. The cockpit is very textural. There are lots of cables and levers. It's all very mechanical, very 1930s looking, and it looks like if you moved your feet around too aggressively down there, you're likely to get your boots hooked on something. It's a very complex and non-user friendly looking cockpit. There is no canopy glass surrounding the pilot. There is, however, a beautifully constructed gun sight here. By construction, I mean the modelling construction. And then we have this nice forward windshield panel in front of the pilot, which is nicely done as well. It's not covered in scratches and ugly marks. It does have a very small amount of opacity, and then as you bring your head around to this angle here, the opacity increases as you get more of the straight-on angle to how the dirt and any imperfections would form in the canopy itself. It's very nicely done. We'll take a little look at the outside of the module now. So starting off with the sun-facing side, you can see it's a very squat little machine, and from this angle also the skin and the aircraft looks really, really nice. I have a very minimal amount of anisotropic filtering on, so it's not going overboard in reducing the jaggies. And the module itself looks quite prominent against the background that is the DCS engine. Markings are nice, nicely painted on. It's not just a monotone flat paint, particularly the red star and the 3-5 numbering on the aircraft itself. The skin is done quite nicely, and you can see the texturing through those paint overlays. We'll go to the shadow side now. In the shadows, obviously, we lose a lot of the color tonality. Everything becomes very dim. And the engine here is showing its impressive nature, particularly with the way the shadows are forming on the stabilizer here at the back. Really nice. Just coming through that gap there and forming a beautiful shadow on the horizontal. Now we can see some of the flecks in the paintwork, and most of this is skin, remember. We'll have a look at some of the other skins in detail in a bit. Very, very good looking module. Now let's have a more detailed inspection of the model's interior. We'll zoom in on the cockpit here, and what I'm usually doing when I do these very detailed zoom-ins when I first buy a module, or if I'm just looking at something for the first time, is to begin with I'm looking at the seams between the various instruments and the various 3D parts that have been molded. I'm looking for gaps in the seams, which I'm really not finding any. And sometimes if you just look towards the sun, you can sometimes catch gaps This looks very well modelled. It looks like they haven't left any nasty gaps. I'm also looking that curved surfaces don't become polygons as we zoom in. And there's a very, very tiny amount of straight edging around some of these instruments, but I think that's actually how the instruments look. If I try to find something that is supposed to be a curved item, like the ends of these handles here, and this metal piece here, it's almost imperceptible that it's not a nice curved surface. The edge of that lever there looks like it's deliberately been machined off into a series of planes. The instruments are incredible looking. I mean, we've got what look like light reflections right down to the very, very smallest pieces of raised material on these needles. It is very nicely done. And we even have a lack of perfect uniformity here. The numbers actually look like they're painted on. There's a gap in the 0 on the 10 there. It's not perfectly uniform. These look handcrafted. It's very nice. Okay, I could wax lyrical about this for hours, but the visual quality of this module is very high. Now this is where we first start seeing some pixelation, and it's where we have these scuffs in the paintwork, and you can see there we are now down to texture. Now I've got 512k textures. I could actually go up in terms of texture quality. This is not the highest texture available in DCS, so it gets even better than this. But running at 1440p, you have to be right in here before you even see the texturing. It disappears at about there. Not many of us fly around zoomed in this far. Now I do notice that moving the head back here, it does tend to push into the headrest, the pilot's headrest. It's not as bad as the effect you get in the DCS Spitfire where your head pushes in and out of the Perspex canopy all the time, which is incredibly off-putting and frustrating. So it looks like they may want to adjust the pilot head limits just to bring it forward to about here, so the pilot cannot in fact put their head through the back of the canopy like that. Let's have a little fly now, and all I've done here is set up the pitch, the RPM, thrust, rudder, and roll. I have not applied any control curves. I'm using a Warthog joystick setup with about a 12 centimeter extension on the joystick. So we're just going to have a look at some handling, and then we'll decide whether we need to add some curves in. So like I said, there's no trim, so you have to be holding this aeroplane in the attitude you want it to fly in all the time, and adding some adding in some rudder in there, just trying to keep that centered. Right, we'll try some rolls. Just going to punch the RPM forward here. There's a lovely delay on the RPM. Thrust. So I'll sit on about 80% thrust at 2400 RPM, and we'll just try a couple of rolls. Okay, slow roll rate. And you can actually tell there as we got inverted that I started losing fuel pressure. That's the carburetor doing its thing. Those who have flown early World War II birds with the carbs will know exactly what I'm referring to. We'll go left, a little bit quicker in the left-hand direction. There's the cutout again, and there's the engine returning. Little dive, nose down. Oh yeah, throws out really well. Very, very unbalanced as soon as we kick into the dive. And we'll just try a low-speed loop here. And just stalling as we get to the end, but maintaining positive G around the loop so we did not get the engine stutter. Let's try a little negative G now, or 0 G. There's the cutout. Splutter, splutter, splutter. Now the engine is actually maintaining an idle. Still, we've still got idle. So let's go positive G. And there's the fuel flow restoring as we get into the positive G situation. So it doesn't completely cut out, at least in that time span that we were having a look at it there. With the altitude I've got here, I'm not very keen on inducing a full cutout. I think we should change the time of day here, and we'll go up to a higher altitude and we'll see if we can do a couple of stalls. Okay, spawn back in. We are flying now at mid-morning in June, so the sun's up in the horizon, and you can see what the model now looks like with its shadowing on medium settings. And this is in the midday, so we've got a bit of flickering here from the shadows. We'll just have a quick look outside while we've got the module in these conditions. Turn the labels off there. And you can see it from the top-down view, and it's some really nice work they've done on the skins, I must say. I might just let the module fly along a bit, and we'll take a look at the effects, if there's any coming from the engine and whatnot. Okay, so no obvious sign of exhaust flame at this point. Go behind the module. And we're not seeing any smoke or anything like that, so it's possible those effects have not been added. The aircraft feels like it's flying just a bit too clean visually in terms of what we'd expect to see, like smoke and the like. There doesn't appear to be much of a heat blur either coming from the engine or the stacks, so that's possibly something that's yet to be added to the module. Let's try a stall here. So I'm just going to throttle off, keeping the nose up. We're still flying. We're flying quite well here. I think it's going to take some time for that airspeed to bleed off. Wow, this aeroplane really does not want to stall. Okay, I've got a buffet now. I can just see the buffet. The aeroplane's starting to rock and shudder. So I'm just riding the buffet. Let's give me a little bit more angle of attack. Let's see which wing drops. Looks like the right wing may be about to go. There we go, the left wing's gone. And left rudder in. And very easy to recover. There's really no concern about stalling this aeroplane, that's for sure. Very, very late to stall. We'll try turning now, and we'll try and get the aircraft to stall in a turn. Okay, a little bit of right rudder, yanking back on the stick here. Nearly blacking out, there we go. Just buffeting. And there we go, left wing down again. So, and we're flying again already. So it will depart, not hugely violently. It's a nice left wing drop. We'll try a left turn and we'll get the same to happen. I'm assuming it's going to also depart to the left in the left-hand turn. There we go. So, departure to the left pretty much in all circumstances. And recovery is almost instantaneous, and there's no real fear that the aeroplane is going to fall out. Now, we were discussing the seams in this module earlier on in the video, and I've just seen something. Back here, in front of the horizontal stabilizer, there's a seam between these two parts of the module, and I think they're not quite lined up perfectly. You can see daylight just between there and there. So, what I'll do is I'll pause the module, pause the game, and we'll just see if we can see what that is. Okay, I don't think I can zoom in quite far enough. No, it's only visible as the pilot, but it looks like there is a seam somewhere behind the red star that is visible from the pilot's perspective, but does not look to be visible on the outside of the module. And there it is there. In fact, it may be in front of the red star. Yes, it is. It's in front of the red star. Let's take a look on the outside again. Now, it may be the flat panel down from the cockpit, the hatch piece that you lower in order to get out of the cockpit. So let's just be sure about that by taking another look. No, it's much further back. Okay, so there is a seam there that needs some attention. So it's very possible that where there's one, there's more, and we may see other ones that just creep in across the module. But there you go, we've identified one little visual flaw there that I think needs some attention. Just notice these lovely little panels through here, allowing sunlight down into the instrument panel, which is a very smart move actually. That's really cool, I like that. I'm in one of these aircraft with the Spanish Civil War skin, and what I want to do here is try and put this aircraft into a violent spin. So I'm going to gain a little airspeed, and then we're going to yank the nose up, full back stick, full right aileron, and full right rudder. Let's do that, 0 throttle, and we're going to throw the aircraft into this maneuver here. And I basically want it to be spinning on its own. So once the nose points at the ground, now the aircraft, there, I've got feet and hands completely off the stick now. So the aircraft is in a spin. We'll try and recover. Little left rudder. And nose forward. Nose forward, nose forward. And now it's going the other way. A little right rudder, and we've corrected it. Now that's a pretty violent maneuver. I think the pilot would be in all sorts of pain at the rate we were spinning there. But the recovery wasn't too difficult. A little bit of left rudder and stick forward, but that pushed us into a spin in the other direction. And then a tiny bit of right rudder and relax on the stick to recover. So the aircraft will go into a wicked spin. It is recoverable, but I imagine if you did this at low altitude, you'd be in trouble. Let's try low altitude. So, in the spin, there we go. We are rotating now. Now I'm going to try and recover. A little left, and it goes the other way, and we've caught it. So you can spin this aircraft at about 1,000 meters and recover in time, which is pretty nice on the pilot. But I think with the violence of the way which it rolls one way and then back the other, that would be very, very difficult for the human body to deal with. Unfortunately, these kind of effects aren't felt by us sitting here in front of our PCs, so we don't have to worry about that sort of thing. Now, we're going to take a look at some of the weapons on this aircraft, and then maybe we'll also take a look at some of the skins that have been provided. So, this aircraft comes only with cannon. And there they go. There are 4 of the buggers, and they are all lined up very centrally down the nose. We'll go and fire a few both along the grass here, and then we'll have a look at them landing on the water. That is one hell of a stream of bullets. Aircraft's pretty stable when it's firing. There's the normal slight movements that I induce just by putting the trigger on, which is just pilot error, and there's a small shaking motion as well to the aircraft itself. But this gun pack looks like it's going to be incredibly effective, particularly against ground targets. That is a big spread of cannon rounds, and there is a lot of ammo. To some of the skins that are available, these are the ones that come with the module. There is a Finnish skin here, sporting the thick yellow bands and the pseudo Hakenkreuz, which has been modified so that the aircraft doesn't breach any international restrictions on such things. There's a Japanese skin here, which looks really cool, and I'm sure that's going to make a lot of people start salivating for Japanese aircraft of the Second World War as well. This is a Soviet Army winter skin, sort of a scratched up mix of green and white. Here we have one of the Spanish Civil War skins from the late 1930s. This, I believe, is the nationalist skin. And then we have another Spanish Civil War skin here. I believe this is the Republican skin. Also looking very tidy. There are 1 or 2 other skins. There's a plain green one, which looks basically very similar to this one here without the markings. And a second Soviet Army one, which is also for summer. So a nice collection of skins have come with this module, particularly like the Japanese one there. And these Spanish Civil War skins look particularly interesting. So one last thing we can do here is have a little listen to these aircraft and get a flavour of the sound profile. The aircraft are not hugely noisy, I've noticed. The sound is rather muted. We'll take a listen to just a single aircraft now, so we can get away from this formation effect. Let's try and take note of the engine tone and the other sounds that we hear inside the cockpit. That's full noise. And as you can tell, it's not particularly noisy, especially the fact that we've got this canopy open here and there's no real effect from the breeze at all. Now we can hear the wind over the engine, but moving the pilot's head around has no impact on that. So the engine certainly drowns out the general wind noise. It's a very nice stereo effect. I can actually hear the engine noise bouncing off the metal plate behind the pilot there. Single engine flyby. And it certainly sounds very nice when it gets off into the distance. You can hear that very faint sort of piston engine sound that you get, that gargling, rumbling sound, which is rather nice, in fact. That's very nice. And when the engine cuts out, the sound stops just a little bit afterwards with the speed of sound having its impact. Let's have a little listen to this aircraft on the ground. I'll put the brakes on and we'll just give it a little bit of throttle. Just starting to overcome the brakes there. Not bad. And from behind, different tone to the engine sound from here. Brakes on again. A little bit noisier too. Let's have a little look at the ground handling. So stick fully back. And we're just going to taxi around here. I'm just applying little touches of rudder. You can see the rudders down there as I'm applying them. And actually this taxis rather easily. It's quite easy to arrest the turn. Okay, well I think we could probably proceed with a takeoff now. That taxiing very easily. It's not as difficult as the Spitfire, that's for sure. Much easier. So I'm just going to apply some throttle and we'll try a nice gentle takeoff. A little bit torquey. It's pulling to the left there. Not severe though. Now it's becoming a little bit harder to handle now. Yeah, very hard now. There we go. Okay, I'm going to push the nose forward now to get off the tail wheel. Try and get airborne. Right, that's the first time I've ever tried to get this airplane off the ground. It certainly was a lot easier to get this off the ground for the first time than it was to get the Spitfire off the ground. We'll try a quick left-hand circuit here. And I'll try and crash it onto the runway in a simulated first ever but terrible landing as well. You can see the gear is remaining down on the shadow there. I'm not going to retard the gear for this, or retract the gear. We'll just go around the circuit with the gear down. Can do a very nice tight circuit given the turning circle and the low airspeed. Right, let's turn on to a sort of final approach here. Don't have any idea what the numbers are for this. Okay, we've just overturned. So let's line ourselves up. I'm not going to use flaps either. We're just going to roll straight in like this. Feels like we're a bit too fast for this aeroplane, so we'll slow it down. And it feels like we're getting close to a decent approach speed. Quite good forward view. And we should better just gently lower this aeroplane down now. Zero the throttle. Okay, keep that nose forward. And dancing on the rudders. Similar to the Spitfire. The nose wheels. Oh, hello. Tail wheels coming up. Tail wheels coming up. It's a bit easier to control. It does tend to have this little sort of slightly extreme switch of about 5 degrees of the nose position. It seems to switch quite quickly either side of the center line, but it doesn't want to then run away on me. So it was, like I just said, it was quickly jumping about 5 degrees either side of where I wanted to point. But when that happens in the Spitfire and DCS, that means you're just about to lose it. And then it very quickly can generate itself into a 360-degree ground loop. But this didn't quite go that way. So I would say it's just a little bit easier to handle. And the fact that I've managed to get airborne and land with the aircraft in, I guess you could say, one piece, on the first ever attempt means that the handling on this machine is quite simple. Certainly a lot more simple than what we have in some of the other models, which is probably indicative of its design. It's got a fairly wide undercarriage there, as you can tell, given the size of the aircraft as a whole. Very large wing surface and a very small fuselage dominated by this giant radial engine up the front. So that brings me to the end of my sort of first look at the aircraft, how it looks, some very basic handling, and a little discussion about the module itself. I guess the question that would be on a lot of people's minds is, so what can this machine be used for? At the moment, it's very obvious that this aircraft is completely outside of the historical sets of aeroplanes that we have in DCS. It is a late 30s designed machine. It is incomparable to the other World War II aircraft that we have in DCS. And it simply won't be able to perform with them on the key combat components. By that I mean airspeed. It does turn relatively well, but that's not going to help you much if you can't catch the guy that you are trying to engage. For me, this module at the moment is an example of a sort of curiosity / fun / learning module. We may get more aircraft to be part of the cohort of this machine in future times with DCS, and I'm hoping that this release encourages other developers to get on board with the DCS World War II project and to bring new other modules into the game.